Now our ABC 7 I-Team insider looks at a national security question. Is there some top secret component of an alleged Chicago plot to bomb mosques? Our investigative reporter broke the story this week. Chuck?
Rob, the I-Team first reported on Wednesday that the federal trial of 18-year-old Xavier Pelkey in New England was being delayed as authorities cited top secret classified information that had to be reviewed in the case. That is unusual in a case involving one simple charge of possessing explosives. When federal agents say they found terrorist flags along with several bombs and explosive components inside a teenager's bedroom here in rural Maine last February, the plot was described as ISIS-inspired. Targets, according to the FBI, were Metro Chicago mosques and religious institutions with an alleged plot to commit mass murder.
ISIS and the threats that are related to ISIS is automatically a national security issue because it's ISIS.
A court here ordered 18-year-old Xavier Pelkey held without bond, but on a simple charge of explosives possession with a lightning-fast trial date of early June. But now tonight, in this newly filed federal court request, prosecutors are asking for a 2-month trial delay to August. That isn't unusual, but this is. Prosecutors stating that many of the reports are at a higher classification level than in most other cases. Former federal prosecutor and ABC 7 legal analyst Gil Sofer tonight says that language signals a host of national security-related possibilities.
In most federal criminal cases, you don't get into questions of classified information. Classified information means it's highly sensitive, secret information, often related to national security. So this sentence tells us, at least the government is of the view, that this involves something related to national security, which can involve secret or even top secret information. That sets this apart, apparently, from the average federal criminal case.
As we tried to get further inside this case, the U.S. Attorney in Maine declined comment and Pelkey's attorney didn't respond. More intriguing, Rob, is that 2 other young men were part of this plot, according to the FBI, a 15-year-old in Chicago and a 17-year-old in Kentucky. They have not been charged.
Yeah, Chuck, how do a 15, 17, and 18-year-old in 3 different states connect and become players in a Chicago terror plot?
This may be one of those cases where they all met on the internet. It has not been revealed by the feds exactly how all of this came together or why there's a 15-year-old in Chicago and a 17-year-old in Kentucky who somehow get connected with this 18-year-old in Maine. That also may well be the problem here involving national security. There may be some intricate kind of backstory to this that the feds don't want out there.
That's what I was going to ask you, Chuck. What does the I-Team think about top security, top secret national security implications? Is there perhaps much more to this that we just don't know about yet?
That certainly is the suggestion based on the feds now introducing this delay of trial for a couple of months, saying that they need to go through all the documents, that there's some classified level of information that they need to redact out of some of the paperwork. The experts we've talked to say that it may be the sources that they use to try to corroborate some of this, how this alleged scheme came together. You know, we end up, I think, sometimes diminishing that there is still a radical Islamic terrorism threat in the world, according to the FBI, and we lose sight of what's happening in Ukraine with Russia, China, that threat, North Korea, to realize that sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be a 9/11 style grand scheme, but more of a lone wolf threat, 1 or 2 people, and in this case, 3, that the feds say were targeting mosques in Chicago.
We often hear from federal officials that the biggest threat to this country would be a domestic threat like this. How does the Fed penetrate a threat like this?
Well, they have become very astute over the last few years, especially at monitoring social media streams and also the dark web, some of these back channel areas that young people, especially young Muslim men, they've been radicalized through some of these back channels. And so the FBI, Homeland Security, many of the local police agencies in big cities, Chicago included, they monitor some of these channels and try to pick up on what would appear to be more than just chatter. People who are actually not only with some outward threat, but also maybe they have the means to travel, to come from Maine or from Kentucky to Chicago and put together some kind of an attack plan.
One last question for you. How does the I-Team track a case like this from Maine to Kentucky here to the state of Illinois?
Well, thankfully, in this case, the feds laid out not only some of the skeletal elements of this scheme initially when the 18-year-old in Maine was charged, but they've become fairly proficient at putting in photos. They put out a half a dozen pictures of the bomb components and the things that they say that this 18-year-old in Maine was building and putting together and was going to allegedly bring to Chicago. And so it gets a lot of attention. And when we put things like that on television, we hear from sources in those communities, people who may know something, they may know the individuals involved, they may recognize parts of these bombs and the components. So it kind of opens up an entire can of worms, Rob.
I remember the first report the I-Team did, and you hear about where this suspect was. It was just like a head turner for sure. Certainly not the last we've heard regarding this investigation. Chuck Gowdy with today's I-Team Insider. Chuck, thanks for your time again.
Hey, if you like that video, be sure to subscribe to our ABC7 Chicago YouTube channel.